We've got Chris Clegg, we've got Chad Young, and we've got Kimball Crossley to talk about finding breakout players. Thank you guys so much for being a part of PitchCon. I'm going to get out of here and enjoy this one. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Nick. Hey, it's so good to be back. I was on a panel yesterday. Now I get to do another panel today, and I'm excited to be with both Chad and Kimball. Potted with Chad before, met Kimball out in Arizona this year. So again, it's good to be back and chatting with you both. We are going to discuss breakout players and how to find them. I am very much looking forward to this because we've got a wide range of perspectives here, and I think it's going to just be an awesome panel. So thanks for tuning in with us. I'm just going to give everybody a minute to kind of intro themselves. So Chad, go ahead and tell everybody a little bit about yourself, what you do, and where they can find you.
Yeah, so thanks for having me on the panel. Excited to be here. My name's Chad Young. You can find me on Twitter at Chad Young. It's a very creative handle. I'm mostly around this panel, I think, because I'm a keeper league and auto new guy. I've been playing auto new for years. I'm leading up a new auto new editorial team over at Fangraph, so we have a lot of auto new content there. Got my auto new hat on, representing. And because I play those formats, those sort of long-term keeper formats, I'm constantly looking for values. Where can I find a guy who's going to be more useful to me than people realize today? So. You got like a real prospect guy, you got a real scout here, and then you got me who's just like, where can I find good, cheap players? So that's my role.
Yeah, and I've got to say, I got to give Chad a lot of credit here. Even though I was, quote, the host, Chad did a lot of behind-the-scenes work. It's been a crazy busy week for me at my day job and also potting panels, etc. So Chad set up a lot of this kind of background stuff. And so really he should be hosting, but here I am. And I want to say thank you
happy
to Chad.
To let you do it. You're welcome.
I appreciate you. Kimball, where can people find your work?
Well, they can't find it because it's privileged, but no, I work for the San Diego Padres. So yes, my work is privileged. I've been a scout for them now, I think this last 5 years. I've been a Major League Baseball scout for the last 25 years. Before that, I was a writer, and that's when I was really into fantasy baseball. And I have great respect for fantasy baseball players because they do so much good digging and analyzing when it comes to this. And really, we're all doing the same thing, which is trying to find those underrated or overrated players, those breakout players, and identify why. And I just love it. And I've been a speaker at the Chandler Fest Symposium, First Pitch, for the last 20 years or so. And again, it's one of my favorite weekends to go and listen and speak.
Yeah, that is awesome. Again, the perspectives we're getting here from a pro scout that's been with a major league team for that long is awesome. Chad's experience in new keeper leagues. And then, I've got a little different perspective in, dynasty. I do minor league, like I would say like online type scouting. Like I do scouting for a website, not pro scouting, and then a variety of dynasty and prospect stuff. So we're all going to kind of bring it, variety of stuff, what we're looking for in breakout players. But let's start this panel by just defining this. What do we mean when we say breakout players? Because we can go a lot of different directions with this. That's what I want to talk about. And we'll just say, like, what exactly do we mean and how do we define a breakout player? Chad, how do you define that term, breakout player?
Yeah, to me, it's anybody whose value, and value is sort of a nebulous term, but anyone whose value is going to, I think, will increase dramatically in the short term. Right. So that could be a player who is sort of, end of draft, late round, $1 in an auction kind of guy, but I think has the potential to be a $10 or $15 guy soon. It could be a prospect who's sort of under the radar, but is about to put up a huge season in AA and jump up onto all the top 100 lists. Like it's basically about like their value today is here. And I think in the future, it's going to be here.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. We look from a fantasy perspective. Everybody wants to find the breakout players. That's how we win leagues. At the top of the draft, like ADP is pretty consensus towards the top of finding those deeper guys that have the potential to return more value than you end up spending on them is certainly what we think about when we think about a breakout player. Now, Kimball, when you are scouting, what are you looking for on the field from a player when we talk about a potential breakout prospect?
Well, often for me, it's, who players are and what they are from the beginning. Like you have an evaluation of what they can and can't do. And with every major league player, there's a significant track record, even if it's just going back to his minor league record. And so you have sort of this expectation of what he can and can't do. And so when I'm looking looking for a change of some kind of alteration. And often it's like fixing a fatal flaw that player had. So, obvious ones with like some pitchers, like they had some mechanical issues and couldn't throw strikes. Well, you feel like they've cleaned it up. And, it can be true for a hitter too. It can sometimes be true for a guy, who's hasn't been able to play defense well enough to stay on the field, that all of a sudden improves his defense, for example, and now he's going to get at bats. And then there's, weird soft factors like opportunity, where, some guys don't always deserve to play, but you can see that they're going to get a chance to play. And that increases their value. And that's why I just think it's, we're doing the same thing. Like as scouts, we just had a meeting, but virtually yesterday, where we were talking about that, like flagging guys and trying to get on them early and seeing some things before there's a statistical trend. And that's so hard now because the stats come fast, on every level in every way. And so really to be first, you really have to jump on it and say like, wow, and maybe anticipate a little bit and say like, it looks like he's going to be able to do this. And I'm going to say that before the trend line shows he obviously is going to do it.
Yeah, I really like that a lot. And just a player that came to mind when you were saying that was like Ceddanne Rafaela. I was at opening weekend in Greenville with the Drive this year and just saw him. And like, I wasn't very familiar with him prior. And he just like really popped off. Like, man, this guy plays really good defense, good speed, got the bat. So like, it was one of those things where if you can catch it first, like before the stats come, then you really stand a chance to pick up on that. Obviously in fantasy and both real life when we're thinking about that. When I'm thinking about a fantasy breakout player, is we're in preseason drafts, I'm basically looking at this as a player that has the potential to take a major step forward from where they're valued right now. So you draft a player, let's say post pick 250, and they return top 100 value. That's kind of what I'm looking at and looking for in a breakout player. And when we're in season, it's a little different because we're not drafting those players, but you may be looking to pick up a player on the waiver wire. And the quicker you are at finding them, the cheaper you're going to get them in Fab. So if you can be quicker on to the reaction on those players, then you're going to come out a lot better from a team standpoint and a financial standpoint from Fab too.
And I think to that point, Chris, and it goes along with what Kimball was just saying too. One of the things you have to be willing to do, especially in fantasy and especially in deeper leagues, is take some of those risks and just say, look, I see something here, and I'm gonna buy in on this player right now. I'm gonna go, Kimball can't just go pick up a player for the Padres, I guess, but we can do that in fantasy and just be like, hey, I'm just gonna pick up this guy. I'm gonna put him at the end of my roster, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'll move on. You're not gonna be right every time. But that idea of like, I see something. There's no statistical trend to Kimball's point yet, but like, I think it's coming. The big thing for me is you want to act on that in the quickest way you can. And then if it doesn't work out, move on and do it to someone else.
Yeah, no, I certainly agree there. And there's even things you can pick up on like in preseason. I remember last offseason, the Angels were really talking up Taylor Ward, that he was going to be like the everyday guy out in the outfield. And we were like, why? Like, why not Joe Adell? Like, run out Joe Adell. Everybody wants the Joe Adell breakout to happen. But they were confident in Taylor Ward, and they basically told us that Taylor Ward was going to be a regular starter. And then, I mean, I would say he broke out to an extent. So just being willing to listen and find those little nuggets here and there can also take you a long way. So,
but see, that's where like, the listening and the trusting the media can get you in trouble, because like every year we hear about like, oh, I'm in the best shape. Oh, yeah. I've got a new pitch. Oh, I've got this. And that's why like, a lot of that stuff I just disregard until I see it for myself,
Sure.
but once I see it, then I really, try and take notice and then maybe even do some background to like, make sure it's legit, it's all part of the game.
Yeah, and I think
from the perspective of a non-scout who I'm not going to see it for myself for a number of reasons, right? I'm not going to be there. I'm also like, I won't recognize it the way that someone like Kimball will. Those news things, I try to parse what teams are actually acting on versus what they're just saying. It's like everybody's in the best shape of their life. We hear it all the time. It comes up all the time. That to me is noise. The Angels saying Taylor Ward is going to be on the outfield every day. We are changing our lineup. This is a thing that is happening. That's a different signal to me, because that's the Angels front office and their management. Everyone else has looked at their team and said, there's something special here. And we're not just going to talk about it. We're acting on it. And so I think that's one of the things from the outside where I'm not a scout, where I can't like watch Taylor Ward every day in spring training and be like, yeah, there's something special here. I'm trying to listen for like, not just what they're saying, but what are they doing? Where are they putting their money where their mouth is, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. Everybody's in the best shape of their life in the offseason, it seems. We see those tweets pop up and there's a picture of somebody in camp. You're like, oh my goodness, best shape of their life type thing. Or you see the videos of them working at Driveline or like Tread Athletics or something. And like those kind of things tend to spark excitement. And sometimes it's an overreaction because those things don't always work for everybody. The quote, best shape of my life doesn't always translate to production on the field. And so we have to be careful with that information, as Kimball said, and actually be able to see the production on the field, which to some extent, like as Chad said too, like we've got to be in fantasy, be willing to buy and on the back end of the roster and be willing to cut. And I think that's the biggest struggle with a lot of fantasy players is we get so caught up in loving our roster and loving players that we aren't willing to cut the back end. But being willing to churn the back end of your roster goes a long way. Redraft, dynasty, you name it. If you're willing to cut players, yeah, you're going to mess up sometimes. You're going to cut a player that ends up taking off. But sometimes it'll reward you because you end up picking up a player instead that really does take off. So the risk reward in all of it is interesting. And it's fun to hear all these perspectives about how we actually look at this and what we're actually looking for, which does lead us into this. Then what are we looking for? We've mentioned a couple things already, but when we think about breakouts, like what do you look at when a guy is suddenly doing something unexpectedly, like really good, like some kind of change, as Kimball mentioned, he looks for a change. What do we do with that? And what signs are we looking for that this could be sustainable? Chad, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, so this is, for me, again, I'm coming at this not as a scout, right? I'm looking at stats. So one of the things I'm often doing is I'm looking at like last 30 days stats. And I think we all know like last 30 days is not necessarily sustainable. There's not necessarily a signal in there. But if somebody's doing something impressive over 30 days, that to me is like, oh, I want to dig in and see what's going on. And just as an example of this, if you'd done this anytime in like May-ish of last year, Christian Walker would have popped. He was like top 10 or top 20 in baseball in WOBA in the month of May. And if you dug into what was going on, his BABIP was fine. His home run per fly ball rate was a little inflated, but nothing crazy. But he had made real plate discipline strides. Well, plate discipline strides, changes in your strikeout rate and your walk rate, those are things that can happen quickly and can stabilize pretty quickly. And so when I see that, that's like, oh, I'm really interested in that change because he's performing better because of something I have reason to believe in. The next thing I want to look at is then I'm looking to see if someone who is a scout or someone with the organization has said anything or talked about anything, like he made a swing change, he tweaked something, he had been dealing with an injury coming out of spring and he's finally healthy. Like, again, sometimes that can be noise, but it can also be evidence, especially if you see it in retrospect, like if you are not in retrospect, right? In foresight. So if you find out like, hey, this guy's been much better for 30 days. And then 35 days ago, there was an article that he's been working on a swing change, or there was an article that his ankle had finally healed or something like that. You start to piece that together with like the changes that he's made statistically are sustainable. There's something that happened with him that explains why this change happened when it did. And that's where I start to get excited and really want to make a big bet from a fantasy perspective.
Yeah, and I think that brings up a good point, like when we look at like stabilization rates for certain stats. And those are important to know, like which stats stabilize like quicker than others. And there's been some good research on that. And I'm actually trying to pull up an article as we talk. Chad, do you have any like off the top of your head, like which stats do you think are the stabilize the quickest?
It's the plate discipline. That's sort of the thing I'm in small samples I'm most interested in, especially if there's a change in approach, right? So like their walk rate has increased because they've stopped chasing so much is a really interesting thing to me because it is something that's in their control, right? A hitter who wants to chase less, I don't want to make it sound like any hitter who wants to chase less can just go out and chase less the next day. Like it's not easy, but it's a change that's in their control that they can actually make happen. And so that's something to me that I'm looking at. Whereas like, you know, they're not hitting the ball any harder. The ball's just falling in more, or they're not hitting the ball any harder. Or they're not hitting any more home or fly balls, but they got a bunch more home runs. I don't really know if that's something that like is a real change or is just the ball happened to fall in more. So I'm looking at that plate discipline stuff. And again, especially that underlying, like they've changed their approach. They're swinging more, they're swinging less, like something that says that they've changed something intentionally is what I'm most interested in.
Are you
Yeah.
sure that plate discipline over a small sample is that reliable?
Is it that reliable? No. Is it more reliable than anything else I can have access to as a sort of outside the game analyst? I think so, right? So it's not that I'm like, oh, he's got 30 days of better walk rate, he's now a fundamentally different player. It's he's got 30 days of better walk rate, and I trust that more than I trust 7 other things I could see that are less reliable. And like I said, for me, that means grab him quickly, use a last roster spot on him. And if a week later I'm like, oh man, I messed that up, I was just, I was betting on something that didn't stick around, fine, I move on. But I've got to look for something I can latch on to. And for me, plate discipline it's far from perfect, but it's maybe the best I can do.
Yeah, there was a good article by Free Stats, but it appears his site's no longer up. So I did find something on stabilization on Fangraphs, and strikeout rate, the stabilization point about 60 plate appearances, which is interesting to see. Walk rate about 120 plate appearances. So we see those tend to stabilize at least to an extent fairly quickly, while some other stats, like obviously like a batting average, is going to be inconsistent. Ground ball rate, fly ball rate, line drive rate, those take a lot longer, a lot more balls in play to really stabilize. So we've kind of hit a bit on the statistical side of it. But Kimball,
well, before you move on, though,
yeah, go ahead. No, you're good.
So chase rate, for example,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't look at a lot of, I'm like old school with stats. Like I'm a Bill James guy and way back, and I've been on walk strike ratio for 30, 40 years. But when it comes to like O swing and things like that, I don't usually dive that deep on it. So I guess I'm curious how reliable, because I know when you say like, it's harder than you think for batters to just say like, oh, I'm just not going to chase as much.
Yeah.
I mean, you think they wouldn't have done that in rookie ball and A ball and whatever. And it's usually some really more subtle change or adaptation that's happened for them. And sometimes it almost takes a mechanical adjustment to make that physical adjustment, make that, that chase adjustment, that sort of mental approach adjustment is what I should have said. So, some of those things, what do you find sort of reliable there, whether it's, chase rate or whatever, like when I hear about exit velo, I'm always like, well, that seems so random to me, like anybody can hit a few balls hard. And hitting the ball hard is not, Franchi Cordero comes to mind. Like he was always a guy that could, when he hits it hard, but
yeah. No, I think what you're saying is exact. It's right in that these things all have to work together at some level. So when I was talking about like go back and look for an article that says this guy's made some kind of change, because you're absolutely right. A lot of times what I'll see is like their walk rate is increased, their strikeout rate is decreased. Why? Well, they're chasing less. Okay, why are they chasing less? They're chasing less because their hitting coach worked with them to raise their hands a little bit. Why did that make them have better plate discipline? I don't know. I'm not a hitting coach. I can't really explain that. But whatever it was, that mechanical adjustment, maybe it put them in a better spot to start their swing, which gives them that extra 100th of a second to make the decision, which has made all of the difference in their ability to identify pitches. I don't know that I can explain why that is. For me, what I'm looking for is a signal that there's a consistent story that makes sense. He made an adjustment. It led to an improvement in his plate discipline, which led to an improvement in his walk and strikeout rate, which has led to better overall performance. That's something that's interesting to me. Whereas there's a lot of other things that just aren't. Does that make sense? Does that answer what you're?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So Kimball, you were talking about K minus BB. What other stats do you find useful that you typically pair with the eye test when you're scouting a prospect?
Well, walk strikeout ratio is huge for pitchers and hitters, both. I mean, it's just because, again, you might look at a stat sheet and see a guy's hitting 320, you know, obvious, or I never look at RBIs and things like that. But I think often, you know, as we sort of hit on, that can even be a signal, even when you see a guy's got good stats, and then you look at his walk strikeout ratio, you're like, oh, let's maybe be a little careful here. He's still not really commanding the zone well enough, and a lot of things might even out. And so, you know, that's you know, a big one. I mean, I'm trying to think of like any other obvious stats that I would look at. I mean, it's just you know, I think that's it, because like when I go into a park and I see a pitcher, and you know, I think I see good command and control, and then I look down at the stat sheet and he's walked 27 and 30 innings. I'm gonna go, whoa, you know what I mean? Ask myself some of those questions.
Right.
I don't know if I'd, you know, look at a bad ERA or some other stats. You know, sometimes I might look like why is he giving up so many hits? You know, like this guy looks pretty good. Why is he giving up so many hits? Something like that. But
yeah. And that's something too that's important with especially prospects, is you're going to get pitchers that have ERAs all over the board. Every park is different. Park factors are huge in the minor leagues, and those tend to be neglected a lot. Was a hitter home park like in a bandbox, like locally, like Asheville. Like Asheville is a great place to hit, terrible for pitchers. Or you go to Myrtle Beach down the road from me, and it's a great place to pitch and terrible for hitters. Like those things are important, and especially at the lower level of the minors too. Like, you know, how reliable is a pitcher's ERA when sometimes the defenses behind them aren't the best with some of the lower level.
And home, you know, to cite a really obvious one, home runs are pretty big. Yeah. You know, when you see that batter, just in a way, I know that sounds strange, but like when you just see a batter that like looks like he's got it all together, and he's got 3 home runs and 200 at bats, he's like, wait, what's going on there? Reverse. But also pitchers, you know, when you see like, wow, he's given up a lot of long balls. And I know, again, that's incredibly obvious, but if you're talking about stats that I will quickly look at with my eyes on a stat sheet, you know, sometimes there's, you know, those are them.
Yeah. So on that note, while we're talking about prospects and minor league players, what are tangible things you're looking for? And we've kind of talked about that, like a mechanical adjustment, but what things are you looking for with both pitchers and then hitters?
Well, I think I've probably said this in other forums before, but you know, you're kind of going with your first impression of the athlete. And it's amazing how often, you know, like I would tell people, like, it's like when you see them coming off the bus, you know, you might start thinking about who looks like a player and who doesn't, just athletically, how they move, size, strength, all those things. And again, to like, you know, if you showed up at the local basketball court and you were a stranger and you had to pick teams, you might just look around at the bodies. And again, it's not just who's big and strong, but who's fluid and graceful and things like that. And so those grab your attention right away. And there are always exceptions. You know, sometimes it's like, wow, that guy looked like $1 million, but he can't play. And that guy, like, boy, I overlooked him because he just looks so unathletic and unimpressive physically, but that guy knows how to play. You know, but that's where it starts. You know, it starts with your physical tools and your physical skills. And then you break it down. And again, I've always had sort of the motto, like, can he do what he needs to do to be what he needs to be? Because a baseball is so position dependent. And so like that little unathletic guy who's a second baseman, and you go, well, wait a second, he's actually moves well enough to play a good second base. Oh, he hits well enough and, you know, to be a good hitter. Wow, this guy's a regular, you know what I mean? And there might be some amazing looking outfielder, you know, athletically, but he can't track a fly ball, he can't throw, and he has no idea how to hit. And it's like, you can't do anything you need to do. And it's everything in between. And same, you know, pitchers too, like even when they come out to the mound, I'm still looking at them athletically and getting a feel for how physical they are and how athletic they are. Some guys go out there and you think like, this awkward guy, I'd be shocked if he could repeat his delivery, and then you're surprised how well they do it. You know, but again, once you see that, then you start looking at their mechanics. So you see that guy with whatever his physical abilities are, how he does it. Does he do it easy? Does he do it hard? Does he do it efficiently? Does he not do it efficiently? And then results. And then as you watch, it's about like how he adjusts. So like, okay, first time I saw him, he put on this beautiful swing and a fastball down the middle. But then every other at bat, he like couldn't recognize or hit a breaking ball. And it all just starts coming together as you watch 3, 4, 5 games.
Yeah. And I think that's the important thing too, is it's hard to make an opinion on a player watching one game in the minor leagues. Like, that's why I'm a proponent of seeing guys like multiple times in a week. Like, now we see the series being 6 days over, of the 7-day week. And so if you can see a player a couple times in a series, and obviously more and more throughout the year, you begin to get a good feel for them. And that way one bad game doesn't cause you to form an opinion, or one really good game causes you to form an opinion too. So I think that's very valuable there.
I would say, just throwing something in there that's valuable, especially if you people that are looking at prospects and for fantasy and stuff like that. We get so much noise about guys, right? I mean, there's so much here, this guy's coming, whatever. And you can read so much about them, and you can see so much data on them. But when you put your eyes on them, it really sometimes completes the picture. And I'm often surprised, like, I'm like, this is not what I expected to see. I heard this guy was this, and when I see him in person, he's not that. And in some ways, you got to trust that, like, trust what your eyes are telling you, and make an opinion on that, or let that help you make an opinion, I should say.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that goes a long way with just seeing it and trusting your gut on it. Definitely works. So let's talk about potential breakouts. Maybe it's a player that hasn't taken those steps and really, maybe they're not performing well, but we think they could. What exactly are we looking for then if we're not really seeing it, but we think there's a chance they could break out? Chad, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, in the statistical profile, there's a few things I'm going to look at sort of this time of year, right? As you're in between seasons, think about who might break out. For major league players, like, I will go look at like their xWOBA and things like that, things that sort of show, are, even if they're not predictive, which xWOBA is not, at least they're descriptive of what happened, to look for discrepancies between their performance at the surface level and what was going on underneath. The other thing I'm going to look for is changes that weren't rewarded, if that makes sense. So just as an example, a few years ago, 2 years ago, after the 2020 season, I was looking at Austin Riley. And Austin Riley had made huge plate discipline gains in the 2020 season, and yet basically had no change in his overall line. I think he had a 307 WOBA in both 2019 and 2020, despite a much better approach at the plate. And when you dig into that, what you find is, okay, he made those gains, but he just wasn't hitting the ball as hard. And you're like, Austin Riley, like, I've read enough scouting reports on him. I've seen enough of his minor league track record to know, like, that's not his problem. He'll hit the ball hard. And so here he made this change. He made a huge gain in his strikeout rate. Other players who made huge gains in their strikeout rate saw big improvements in their overall performance, and he didn't. So why is that? You dig in, you find out that it's about this, and then you can make a bet on, like, hey, I think that power is going to come back. And if he can keep those plate discipline gains and get that power back, like, I'm not even asking him to do anything new. I'm not saying develop a new skill. I'm not saying do something you haven't done before. I'm just saying put together your gains in the plate discipline with what the power I know you have. It's like, I love looking for things like that, where somebody made an improvement, but it didn't show up in the sort of bottom line. And so I was, going into the 2021 season, I was all over Austin Riley, and like, that's obviously worked out quite well. Another guy that same offseason, Nick Castellanos, had made big gains in his contact quality. He was hitting the ball a lot better, but had lost some of his plate discipline. It was like, all right, well, again, what's going on there? When you dig into that, it turned out he had made some changes in his stance and in his like pre-swing routine, for lack of a better way to put it. I was like, okay, well, if these gains in his contact quality are real and he can spend the offseason getting that plate discipline put back in place, there's a chance for real breakout here. So those are the kinds of little things I'm looking at, of like, there was a change made, but the overall performance didn't show it. Why? And do I believe that change can then stick and lead to a better overall performance?
Yeah, I think that's useful, especially when we see players change things down the stretch, like you mentioned. So, like Brayan Bello, for instance, in September, significantly upped his slider usage, over 10% increase in usage there. And over his final 6 starts in September, October, he had 31 and a third innings, a 2.59 ERA. Like, that doesn't show in his overall line for last season. but there was a tangible change down the stretch. Like those are things we can see, a pitch mix change. And that's why I think looking at like those rolling charts like that are useful. Like Savant, you can break down the pitch mix month to month, and I'm sure Fangraphs, those you can do that as well. But seeing those things is useful. Like why did somebody like Mitch Keller, for instance, Mitch Keller was not bad in the second half. And what happened? He changed his pitch mix and it began to pay off for him. So seeing those things and then seeing a solid performance down the stretch, I think does matter, even though it doesn't show in the overall line.
Yeah, Bayo and Keller are good examples. Reed Detmers, another. Reed Detmers, when he made his last return from the minors, he had made some tweaks to his slider. I don't have the notes in front of me, but I think it was his slider that was suddenly a lot harder and had different movement. And it's like, okay, he obviously went down, intentionally worked on something, came back, and the results in the second half of the season followed, right? He had a 3.77 ERA for the season, but it was 3.04 in his last 13 starts after that call up. So those kinds of changes are super interesting to me.
Yeah, and we had a comment in the chat regarding Bayo. It says Chandler preaches to avoid making judgments based on small sample sizes. While I do agree, it's something to monitor. So, like, think about if Bayo's increased slider usage sticks. Like, if we see that in the spring and he's continuing to use the slider more, then that's something that's really worth watching. I'm not saying it's a calls for a definite breakout, but like I think Chad said at the beginning of this whole panel, like we have to be willing to take chances on these later picks and hope some of this stuff sticks, which is kind of like what my hope is with Bayo. The slider's a really good pitch. Let's just see him use it more. We saw it the last month, the final 6 starts. Let's hope it translates into spring training and into the season as well. So it's a good point. But I also think on the flip side, we do have to think like the what ifs, because that's how we're going to find these breakouts. If we aren't willing to take chances, then ultimately it's hard to win in fantasy because you have to hit on those later picks. Those really matter. So I do agree with that comment to an extent, but also we have to, see if it does stick. We don't know yet. So
how do we see the chat?
I'm on. We can't see it in here, unfortunately,
What?
but I'm on the Twitch. I just have the Twitch stream on my other monitor, kind of seeing some of this.
So people could be dissing me, and I have no idea.
Nobody said anything about you. You're good. You're good.
And I'm not going bald. I'm not wearing a hat because I'm going bald. It looks like that in a way, but it's so not true.
All right. So we talked a little about that. Kimball, what are you looking for in prospects that you think could break out? So let's say you've done some research in the off season, and there's some players you've identified that you're going to be watching this spring. Love it. So you're going to be watching these players early in the year. What are you looking to see?
Well, I know this sounds strange, but I try and make my first evaluation off of what I see with my eyes, because I don't want to come in, with prejudice. And so like a lot of that stuff is noise. And okay, some guys can do this. Okay, we'll see. I'll see what I see when I see them. But once I see something with my eyes, now I'll go and look. Unfortunately, I'm in that position. I'm right now. I'm being judged. I'm being paid to go and tell what I see and then use that to inform my opinion. So I really try and not do a lot of. In fact, I used to before I was a scout, I'd comb this prospect lists and things like that and be ready. But now I just no, I almost want to not know. Like when I see a team, I don't want to know who's supposed to be great, who got the big bonus. I want to go by, see if I can spot them and not just prejudge and also, influence myself in a wrong way. I like them because I was supposed to like them. And so I really try and go in with a clean slate. And then, but once I see it, then I start going, okay, whoa, I'm seeing something here. What's up with this guy? What's up? And then I'll try and dig as deep as I can. And with a lot of things we're talking about, if I see all of a sudden a player is performing a lot better, I'll be like, what's going on? And I'll start asking around and reading and researching. Did he make a change? And how much can I trust this? I remember one spring training, I always kind of was intrigued by Charlie Morton, early in his career. And, when he was, I guess I've seen him in the fall league as a Brave, if I'm remembering correctly. And I remember one spring, I don't even think he was in my coverage. It was just an opposing team, he was playing, and he took the mound and this is the spring where he lowered his slot because he used to be a high slot pitcher and he lowered his slot. And I remember thinking, this is so smooth. This looks so easy. This is like I buy this mechanical adjustment. And so many guys come with mechanical adjustment and you don't buy it. But then when you see for yourself, and it's funny then because even then still Charlie had to overcome a lot of mental, and pitch choice things over the years. But like I was never surprised that it started clicking because I saw that.
Yeah, that's good. I also realized we can't see the comments in here because I saw some added in and it's over on the side. I just missed the tab completely. So yes, you can see the comments beside private chat. It says
Maybe
comments.
it's just for the best.
Yeah, maybe. But they're hyping you up right now, Kimball. Best shape of his life. Kimball swing change Crosley. I love it. Like good stuff here. So, we've discussed quite a bit of things that we're looking for. So now it's time to talk about some players because I think that's what a lot of people are here listening for. Like, who are these breakout players? And people want to know because people want to get these guys on their fantasy teams, the prospects on their dynasty team, because that's how you win. We've talked a little bit about how to identify these players, but ultimately, who are they? So, Chad, I'm going to let you talk about some at the MLB level. Who are some players that you think could be big breakouts?
Yeah, so I mentioned before I like to look at guys who had improvements, meaningful improvements that weren't necessarily rewarded in their overall line. And there's a few guys who sort of jump out at me. There's sort of three I want to talk about quickly, and there's a fourth guy I think is interesting for different reasons. But JD Davis, there were 267 players I think who had 200 plus plate appearances last year. He had the 11th largest increase in his barrel rate among all those players, and yet his WOBA went down by 0.024. That's a pretty significant drop for a guy who made some real strides in how well he was hitting the ball based on his barrel rate. The other guys of the players above him in that barrel rate increase saw their WOBAs go up by 0.039 on average. So there are some changes he made and this is when I need to dig in a little more to see like what drove that change. But seeing that kind of a jump in his barrel rate without it being rewarded on the field is something I'm like, okay, that's sort of interesting. I also think there's an opportunity for him to get more playing time than he has historically this year. So Davis is one that I'm intrigued by. Another guy who I think comes out from sort of a similar analysis. I got to figure out where. Sorry, I'm pulling up my notes. It'll be here. Oh, Dylan Carlson decreased his strikeout rate by over 5% last year. Among the 25 best strikeout rate improvements in baseball last year, that same group of guys. And again, his results got worse. He went from a 336 WOBA to 306 WOBA. I think for Carlson, it's a little bit of a different situation because he doesn't hit the ball that hard. And so I think the dead ball this year really sapped any chance he had. I don't know how much we should rely on having a dead ball again, though. And I think that there was a little bit of a hidden breakout for Carlson in that plate discipline improvement, that if the ball goes back to something a little less mushy or whatever it was, he could not just sort of return to what he had before, but bring back the power he had with a less dead ball and show this plate discipline improvement. And so he's another guy who late in drafts, I think there's a real opportunity for Carlson to step up, but I think he's reliant on some changes in the environment because I don't think he hits the ball hard enough with this ball to really break out. So the other guy who shows up here as in that same sort of strikeout rate change this is a really random one. And I don't know that I'm picking him up in any drafts, but Ryan Jeffers, who is set to be the backup catcher for the Twins behind Christian Vasquez, made the biggest improvement in baseball last year in his strikeout rate. It went from 36% in 2021 to 26% in 2022. He did that and his WOBA went down. He actually has some decent contact quality as well as having that improvement. And I don't know if he's going to get a shot. They brought in Christian Vasquez, but Jeffers is a guy who I'm intrigued by. I think like he historically has run over 30% strikeout rates while having barrel rates in like the 13-14% range. And if he can actually keep that strikeout rate down in the mid-20s and maintain those barrel rates, like that's a recipe for, I don't think he's going to be like an MVP candidate or anything like that. But from catcher, which is a pretty shallow position, that's a recipe for a pretty solid season. I just don't know that he's ever really going to get an opportunity to show it.
Yeah, those are good. Alec Boehm's one identified that he significantly increased his zone contact this year, 7%. His overall contact rate came up about 5 percentage points. In turn, the O swing did come up too, which is something to monitor. But still, last year he hit 280. I know there was minimal power, hit the ball on the ground a lot, but his like EVs are actually pretty respectable. Like average EV hard hit rates are well above average. And honestly, those were down a bit from 2021. So if he returns to that form from power with the increased contact skills, then there's a recipe for success there. Let's go to the prospect side, Kimball. You have anything?
Well, a couple of things.
Yes.
One is, I think, Chad, you've said a couple of times, like you really can't trust what your eyes are, or you can't really scout. But I think, especially with hitters, you can do a little more than you think. Like just try and watch how they're being pitched, in, out, up, down, soft, hard, breaking stuff, and then what they're doing with it. And without saying too much about like Alec Boehm, like try and figure out, like, just because you have some data points that tell you some things, and so you just assume he will then now add the power back or something like that. Look at how his hits and swings are happening, and I think that can really be helpful. I'll go back to like Teoscar Hernandez, who used to like be a classic pull off the ball, try and pull everything hitter, and when he started just like and it reminds me of Sammy Sosa, forget the whole steroid thing, but Sammy Sosa was as bad as it could get about like opening up and trying to pull everything, pull off the ball. And maybe it was, some help or whatever, but he started realizing, I just have to stay on the ball. I can hit it out to any part of the ballpark. And Teoscar, who's just a physical marvel, I think that's part of why he took a step up. So things like that can happen. I can't really talk about on this forum, current players or prospects or whatever. I will talk about one player because to put some of this together, and also I'm curious what you guys think, and that is Matt Carpenter. So now Matt Carpenter, a lot of themes we've talked about here, go to the Matt Carpenter story. And I don't know if I had ever even written a full scouting report on Matt Carpenter prior to this year. I would run into him in spring training because I was down in West Palm. I didn't have the Cardinals, but I'd see him. And I remember seeing how his swing had gotten really kind of messed up, and he was just gotten crazy, steep swing and trying to lift the ball. And it was just like, well, it's not working anymore. And then I happened to see the Yankees, mid to late last year, and I wasn't in there to see Matt Carpenter, but he was on his roll then. And I was, of course, skeptical. I was like, what, guys, you don't just go from one extreme to the other. Like, his track record the last couple of years is pretty bad. And like, is this just a fluke? And then when I watch BP and watch him do it game after game, I was like, I don't think this is a fluke. Like, it looks so easy. The swing looks so smooth. Everything looks so balanced. His power is not coming hard. It's coming easy. We know his whole track record and how he used to be, have great pitch discipline and stuff like that. And then I started digging deep, like what up with Matt Carpenter? And that's when I found what a lot of other people found, obviously Ron before I was, about his whole journey to becoming a better hitter late in his career. Like, I was surprised to find out that he wasn't really much a guy that really thought about his mechanics much before. And now he did. And so I started saying, like, I'm buying in. And I can remember, like, trying to be early on something, I was even talking to Padres people early and saying, like, look, I don't think we're going to get him because he's kind of key to the Yankees right now. But boy, I would love to get Matt Carpenter. Well, now we have Matt Carpenter, and it's not like me. It's like a whole process, but whatever. But I'm glad we have him, and I'm hoping that everything we saw was legit. And I don't, other than health and age-related injury type things, I'm really pretty confident he's going to maintain, a certain level of what he did last year. Are you guys?
I'm literally moving up my rankings right now, just based on that last couple minutes. I mean, this is one where I think for me, when I say I can't see it, I can look at the numbers. I don't trust myself enough as a scout to say, oh, I see the changes, I see how easy the power is, because I'm not comfortable enough with my own ability to analyze that to be like, yeah, that's what's going on. And so for me, it's much easier to look at to Carpenter and be like, the track record the last few years looks a little shaky. I don't know how legitimate this is. So it's really interesting. Like, I love hearing this kind of analysis because, and I'm always looking for it. Like, where can I read a scout's take on what changed for this guy? Because it's something that I don't feel like I can get for myself easily. So yeah, he's moving up my rank.
Well, Chris, go ahead.
No, you're good.
Well, one thing that's interesting, and I learned this way back when I was a writer covering minor league baseball, and it was like, oh, the mental affects the mechanical, and the mechanical affects the mental. And sometimes when guys get into bad habits, there's a reason they got into that bad habit. And sometimes when they get out of the habit, they slip back into the bad habit. And a lot of that thing, is take a basic example, like, when you're over swinging, or you got a long swing, it's because, you don't trust yourself anymore. You feel like you've lost bat speed. So now you're opening up and you're flying open early, you're cheating to get the balls, or you're swinging too hard and all those things. So, sometimes those bad habits come back. You get in a good groove and you trust your mechanics, but then your mechanics start going away. Like, I wish there was more. Like, it'd be so interesting. I'd love to take a deeper dive on what was going on with Albert Pujols last year. Because when they talked about he changed his hand position, I'm like, this is not a guy that I wouldn't have looked at a million hours of video and made a correction in his hand position about 3 years ago. What? So that's why, like, even those in the game, like, we're hoping we're right about Matt Carpenter. We're hoping that whatever got him into some bad habits doesn't come back. But we don't know. They're human beings,
Yeah, the mental and the mechanical are highly underrated, in my opinion. I think about Cole Winn last year. Now, Cole Winn was really good in the month of April. He got line drived on the knee the last start in April. While there was no damage, there was pain, and the pain actually affected his release point and messed with his mechanics completely. I mean, I went back and watched a lot of film, like pre and post, and his release point, everything was off afterwards, and he got in that bad habit, and it stuck all year. And Cole Winn was terrible. I still like Cole Winn's stuff and think he could be something, but it's interesting that we kind of don't think about that as often. But sometimes the mental aspect really affects a player. The mechanics get thrown off by anything, and it totally affects performance. So that is those are big things to think about with players.
Yeah, just think about any sport you yourself play and how easily we can get in our own head, and just a lot of it is just like we doubt ourselves. I need to serve the ball harder in tennis, and like that's the last thing we need to be thinking about, and we can't get out of these ruts.
Yeah, I even think back to Kyle Wright. Like, Wright was a head case in the majors. Like, he was always really good at AAA. I'd watch him like, this kid can pitch, but he'd come up to Atlanta and he couldn't pitch. But something clicked in that World Series game when he came in relief. He threw 4 2/3 and was really good. And I was like, man, he just looks different on the mound. And those are things that numbers can't necessarily tell you, but the mental aspect carries players a long way. There's comments about mental game in golf. Yeah, 100%. I'm a golfer. I coach golf, so I 100% get that. That's a huge aspect in all sports too. So
yeah, and I sometimes wish I were a writer again, because like I end up having these questions that I can't get answers to, and I was like, well, if I was a writer, could I go and like really try and investigate some mystery that's going on in baseball? And there's many mysteries going on every season, every day in baseball.
100%. Do you guys have any more comments before we take some listener questions on breakout players? All right. If anybody has any questions, now will be the time to do so. We did want to leave a little bit of time open because I figure there may be some questions. There was some good discussion about Matt Vierling being a potential breakout. As we wait for some questions, there was a comment that Carpenter better than Vierling. So that's fun. But there was some good discussion I was following in the chat about Matt Vierling. Obviously moved from the Phillies to the Tigers. Is he going to get to play? What kind of production can we expect? Any thoughts on Vierling from either of you two?
I'm going to give you a no comment on that one, even though I do have some thoughts.
All right, I got you.
I haven't really dug deep into Vierling. I think there are some things to like from what I see about his track record. He can draw walks. He has not shown a propensity to strike out at a particularly high rate. And so when we talked about like plate discipline's one of the first places I go, and he seems to have that. He's got some good exit velocities. His max EV is good. Like what he hasn't really done, and I'm not really sure I've got a good sense of why, is for a guy who seems to hit the ball hard pretty often, he does not have a particularly impressive barrel rate. And so I think that's something I would want to dig into a little more of, like, why is he over his, brief major league career had a close to 50% hard hit rate with a less than 5% barrel rate? A little bit of it might be launch angle, but I don't think that's the major issue. So I'm just sort of, I don't know. I'm intrigued to see that, to try to dig into that, but I don't have a good answer for I think he's gonna be a breakout.
So using some of your analytics, taking Vierling, for example. So the reason a lot of people are excited about him is because you're seeing that he's hit a lot of balls hard, right?
Sure.
Okay. What else besides that?
The playing time.
So like I said, the plate, and the playing time opportunity and the plate discipline.
Playing time and hit the ball hard. I'm not like trying to be facetious. So those are two things that have people intrigued, like maybe more playing time and hitting the ball hard. And so then, like, they're also looking at some, like, extrapolating his stats in a small sample and saying, if you build out, right? Are there underlying negatives there? What were you saying, that like his barrel rate, and what else?
So yeah, his barrel rate doesn't seem to match his hard hit rate. From my perspective, he hits the as often as he hits the ball hard, he is not actually getting that many barrels. And so sometimes that can come down to, like, I'll give a different example of this. Is like, we get lots of conversations about Ke'Bryan Hayes and how if he could just elevate the ball more. But if you look at what he's doing, when he elevates the ball, he doesn't actually hit it as hard because he goes the other way when he elevates the ball. And so Ke'Bryan Hayes is not a case of just, it's not as simple as if he elevates the ball as hard as he's hitting it, he'll be great. Because right now he's hitting the ball really hard, pulling it on the ground, and not really hard going the other way in the air. So there's a lot of changes that need to happen there. I haven't dug in enough to Vierling to say if that's what's going on. But when I see a big discrepancy between how often a guy hits the ball hard versus how often he barrels the ball, it makes me wonder if, like, is he just smashing the ball on the ground, and when he elevates it, he doesn't actually hit it that hard? Because if that's the case, that's not as exciting to me as a fan.
Right. Well, selfishly, I'm just trying to learn something here, like trying to piece it together, because, like, when people talk about hitting the ball hard, like, you can swing harder. That will help you hit the ball harder. But swinging as hard as you can is not always best.
Right.
And so that will reduce your barrel rate. And then I'm also trying to figure out your type of swing. If there's some length to your swing, obviously maybe that makes it harder to barrel, right? Like the longer your swing is, but you also might hit it harder when you do hit it. So now I'm using Vierling as, like, I'm sort of exploring.
Yeah.
I think
I don't think he's got the prettiest swing.
Yeah.
The other thing with Vierling
too.
Yeah,
what?
that's what I was just about to say.
Oh,
The platoon splits. He hits the ball really hard against lefties, and when he faces righties, he has a lot more weak contact. And so, that in certain, like, from a fantasy perspective in Auto New, where you can use a short side platoon guy, that might be fine. Like that, you might just know it, use him against lefties, sit him against righties. That's okay. But it certainly impacts the probability of him having, like, a legitimate big breakout, both in terms of playing time and in terms of just what his overall line looks like.
And guys learn, and I don't know enough about Vierling to really judge, but guys learn. Like, one of the guys that had a really good player that had a really bad swing was Todd Frazier. And he just had the makeup to overcome his swing, whereas I think and also the size and strength. But I don't think a lot of other players would have overcome that swing and had the career that he had. And so, maybe people are banking on, when they get a player like Verling, like, oh, we know more about him. We know he's going to like do this and he's going to take steps up.
We got a question in there about Ryan Mountcastle, and I do have thoughts on Ryan Mountcastle. They were actually in the notes for me to talk about, and then I sort of didn't get to them. So I'm going to throw this out here now. Mountcastle last year was tied for 6th in baseball in barrels and barrel rate. And if you look at the guys around him on that list, there's no surprises here, right? Aaron Judge, Jordan Alvarez, Kyle Schwarber, Shohei Ohtani, Austin Riley, Matt Olson, Pete Alonso, Vlad Guerrero Jr. Like, that's the rest of the top 9. He has by far the worst WOBA of that group at 316. No one else is below 344. Part of that is the park is a bad fit for him now with the wall change. The other thing, though, is his pull rate dropped significantly last year. He had about a 39% pull rate in 2021. In 2022, his pull rate was 33.8%. That is 6 or 7 percentage points lower than anybody else in that list of guys at the top of the barrel rate list. And pulling the ball, like if you barrel the ball towards the foul pole, it has a much shorter distance to travel to get out. And Mountcastle, I'm not sure how much is the pull rate versus how much is the change in the park versus the dead ball, things like that. But he's doing a lot of really, really good things under the hood from a statistical standpoint that have me intrigued.
Yeah, I just look at the spray chart there, and you can see that he lost quite a few home runs due to that fence change, and also a lot that went to like right center. So like kind of going oppo, where they're just like super like loud outs, like to the warning track, where, with a little bit of change, I think we could see him really take off. So Mountcastle's an interesting one to watch. He does chase a lot. That's obviously a little bit of a red flag there. And just look, you mentioned the WOBA, but his ex-WOBA on contact was 463. So there's a massive gap on, between his ex-WOBA and ex-WOBA on contact.
He also,
tell me about his walk strikeout ratio the last couple of years. Improved,
Mountcastle?
get worse, stable.
He's been pretty stable, but it's been pretty stable. He's been his 3 years in the majors, his walk rate 7.9%, 7%, 7.1%. His strikeout rate's been a little more fluctuating, 21.4 as a rookie, 27.5 in 2021, and then down to 25.3. But like, he's going to walk 7.5% of the time. He's going to strike out 25% of the time. Like that's pretty, I think, fairly reliable given his track record. The other quick note on Mountcastle is his home run per fly ball rate is much lower than the other guys with those barrel rates, but it's that bad at home and on the road. So the park is an issue, but it's not the only issue because he's having the same problem on the road, which could be a good side. It could be like, hey, that'll get better on the road. There's no reason he should be that bad on the road, but it also could be, to your point, Chris, it's the direction he's hitting the ball could be due, and I don't know how easy that is for him to fix or if he's trying to fix it.
Yeah. Couple more.
No more. By the way, I just spent the last like 4 minutes looking at Ryan Mountcastle video of him hitting home runs just to remind myself what he looks like. He's good. I mean, I'm just looking at him hit home runs.
Yeah,
but
when he hits home runs, he's good. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it was all over the plate, though. I mean, there were adjustments made. There were, up and away, going oppo. There was stuff he was pulling it. I don't know. There are certain times. I mean, Kimball, you'll obviously speak to this. Sure, there's the play discipline stuff, but also, what does their swing look like? Does this feel like something that is just he sold out in a moment and then there it is, or does it feel like, oh, that's a swing of a guy that we consider to be one of the better in the leagues? I mean, can you speak to that really quickly, Kimball?
Well, I'm not going to really speak too much specifics of Mountcastle, but I will say, it sounds like a lot of big, strong guys that don't have the quickest bats, when they learn to use the whole field, they can really figure some stuff out. And then it's all about, can they keep you honest when you start coming inside? And when you're talking about that profile, he's not pulling the ball as much. He's taking the ball the other way, but his other numbers are good. That's intriguing. That's why I asked about his walk strikeout ratio. If it had blown up the rest of his game to be thinking totally the opposite field, and now he had a big hole inside. So, without going into too much depth or I couldn't even tell you much about Ryan Mountcastle. I've seen him a little bit in the fall league a few years ago, but that's it.
And last one, yeah, Nick Pollock is my breakout, says Bobby Long. I hope that you guys can agree with that one for 2023. But no, Chris, Chad, Kimball, thank you so much for being a part of PitchCon. This was a fantastic one. Some great insight of how to apply this in season and find the breakout players for ourselves. But thank you all so much for being a part of PitchCon this year.
Yep.
Thank you.
Nick.